We're starting right now. Okay. So, Amen. Thank you. So we're starting now a new parak. This is parak Ketzad Me'abrin. As my brother-in-law Yosef Schwartz pointed out, it's not Me'arvin like we've been talking about. It's Me'abrin, speaking about another din. It's not about Eruv. It's about being Me'aber. It's right here. It's about being Me'aber. It's about, from the word Ibur, as we'll see in the Gemara, the concept of making the boundary of a city. How do we determine the boundary of a city? And we make it in a more inclusive way where it protrudes and looks like an Isha Be'ubra, where a woman is pregnant. So for example, let's say that there's a house at the outset of the city and it's kind of pushed away from the rest. So we'll build around that. We'll build our tchum around that. So it'll have a little bit of a protrusion. We'll see today that that is subject to a machlokes, if that is the correct language. Again, bottom of Nun Beis, Mid Beis. And we're going to learn about 5 lines of Eruvin, and then the rest of the night is all Agadata. It's about 30 mini sugyas in Agadata. Honestly, I'm not even sure we're going to finish before Mariv. If that happens, then I'll just stop wherever we stop, and then I'll pick up on Shabbos from that stopping point, which is fine because these Gemaras, if you look just at Nun Gimel, Amud Aleph, Nun Gimel, Amud Beis, and Nun Daled, they're gezunt pages in Shas. So again, at the new parak, let's get started. Ketzad me'abrin es ha'arim. How are we me'aber the cities? What does that mean? Says the Rashi, the first Rashi in the parak, Ketzad me'abrin mefarsh begmar lashon isha ubra ditnan lekaman hanosen eruvo be'ibura shel ir. When if you put the eruv at the protrusion of the city, right? So that's what it means, is when we're making the city limits from which we're going to determine the 2,000 amos. So if there's a house that protrudes, it's be'ibura shelir, not be'eruv, be'ibura shelir. So how do we do that? Answers the Mishnah, bayis nichnas, bayis yotze. If you have kind of the houses are kind of inset a little bit and protruding, we follow the protrusion. Pagum nichnas, pagum yotze. A pagum is a tower of some kind, where that may be a guard tower. And if that's protruding from the city, we use that, the one that's further out as our outer limit. And then we also have hayusham Gedudios Gevos Asar Tfachim, that if we were to have ruins that are 10 Tfachim tall, that would also be, they have to be at least that size. We don't just randomly make our Ibur. It has to be around something. Ugsharmu Nefashos, bridges and Nefashos. Take a look at Rashi. Gisharmu Nefashos, Ke'in She'osin al HaKever. These are things that are done over a kever. So what are Nefashos exactly? How does ArtScroll translate Nefashos? What does he say there? Is it a tombs? That's okay. All right, so tomb building. So it's like a mausoleum. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, fine. So these things that are above them, shesh behem dira, shesh behem base dira. Not that people live there, but it's a base dira halachically, that it's of size. Then in all of those cases, motzinas hamida kenegdan. In all of those cases, we look at the outermost livable space, and that's where we are me'aber. And as we've spoken about already, we square off the corners. You are marviach the zavios, and this is the language of the Mishnah. Kadeshe niskares zavios, as we've spoken about a number of times, that if you have a circle, then 2,000 amos would make a perfect circle. However, if you square it out, then you benefit from the corners. You'll benefit from the corners, and then you get much more than you bargained for. You get about 40% more. Okay, starting the Mishnah now in Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, we're 4 lines down, and from now until we finish tonight is all going to be some Agadata. Says the Gemara as follows: Rabbi Shmuel Chad Tani Me'avrin with an ayin, Chad Tani Me'avrin with an aleph. Of course, we know famous din in Shulchan Aruch that if you do not distinguish between an aleph and an ayin as a chazan, you're not allowed to be a chazan. Big problem. When I was in Eretz Yisrael, there was a guy in Eretz Yisrael. He's a Skokie boy, one of the Shoshan brothers. When he lanes, he does it perfectly. The ayins are perfect. They're perfect. They're not overly guttural, but he nailed it. So you gotta keep it reasonable. So here the Gemara says that there was a machlokes in the Masorah. What was the Mishnah? Was it with an ayin or with an aleph? So it says the Gemara, mandatani me'avrin with an aleph, that's aver, meaning it would be like the protrusion of a limb from the body. That's how they would shape the eruv. And the one who says mandatani me'avrin with an ayin is ki'isha ubra. These are just different ways to frame it up. The idea is the same. The halacha doesn't change. The only question is, what mashal are you using? Are you using ibur with an ayin, a pregnant woman where her stomach protrudes? Or are you using an example of an aver with a limb where your arm protrudes and your head protrudes? However you want to look at it, the result is the same. Another Rav and Shmuel discussion. What's this double language? What was bekefil? What was the double? Rav and Shmuel. Chad amar shnei batim ze lifnim mizeh. It's 2 rooms, one that either leads into another or one within another. And some say that the Maras Machpelah was 2 levels. I could understand why you'd say that a 2-floor building, that's why you're going to call it a Machpelah. But if you say one room that either leads to or that's inside another, my Machpelah, what's the double? Strange question. I could answer that question by saying that there's 2 rooms. I don't know why they say that. Seemingly, the language of Machpelah, the assumption of the Gemara, is that we would only use that when it's stacked and not when it's side to side. Answers the Gemara, Shekfula Bezugos, because of course, who's buried there? You have all of the Zugos who are buried there. We'll speak about that a little bit more about who they are and right now. Because the Gemara brings up the fact that Kiryas Arba, Hi Chevron, right? We know the pasuk in the Torah. So it says the Gemara, Mamre Kiryas Arba. What's pshat in the pasuk? Amar Rav Yitzchak Kiryas Ha'arba Zugos. Kiryas, it's the city of the 4 pairs. Adam Chava, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, and Leah. Those are the 4 Zugos that are buried there, and that's why that city is called Kiryas Arba. Okay, good. Vahibi Mei Amrafel. Another Rav and Shmuel machlokas. What does the pasuk mean when it says Amrafel? Was Amrafel really his name? Rav and Shmuel. Chad Amar Nimrod Shmo. His real name was Nimrod. V'lama nikra Shmo Amrafel. Why was he nicknamed Amrafel? Sha'amar v'hipil Avram Avinu b'soch kiv shanesh. Amar Pol. He said that you should jump. He told Abraham to go, and that's the name that they gave him as a nickname. He was the bad guy who is Kishmo Kainhu. It's kind of like a little bit of a playful way to look at it. Amrafel Shmo. No, really, his real name was Amrafel. Nimrod. Why did they call him Nimrod? That's called Ha'olam Kulo Alab Bit Malchuso. He made the whole world rebel against the Kadosh Baruch Hu 1/3 of the way down. Next pasuk. Another Rav and Shmuel machlokas. A famous machlokas. Who is this new Paro? So says the Gemara, that's a machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Chad Amar Chadash Mamish. According to one sheet, it's Mamish, a new paro. It's not a revitalized paro. It's not a reinvigorated paro. It's just a different person. V'chad Amar Nisheni's Chad Shuk Zerosov. Now the rules changed. The policies changed. Manda Amar Chadash Mamish Tichsiv Chadash. Pasuk says Melech Chadash, right? And Umad Amar Sheni's Chad Shuk Zerosov Mitalok Siva Yamas Vayimlach. We don't have a change of the guards in regards to him dying and then another king being elected, whatever the right word is. So that is the machlokes here. Is it a new paro or is it an old paro? I don't understand. If you're just going to tell me that his gzeros changed, then what about the pasuk? Pasuk says that he didn't know Yosef, but he did know Yosef if it's the same king, because he was his viceroy. So says the Gemara, he just totally blacklisted him. He's basically ignored him, and that is how the machlokes plays out in regards to these 2 shitas within Vayakam el Chadash al Mitzrayim. We're almost halfway down. We're at the mnemonic in the middle of the page, actually a siman, not really a mnemonic. Shmonasre v'shnemasar lamadnu b'David and Vayiven. Let's get through all of them. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halfway down, Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Taras. Yudches Yomim Gadalti Eitzel Ravoshia Beribi. I learned by Ravoshia Beribi for 18 days. We only learned one thing, and that was something in our Mishnah, which is Ketzad Me'abran Esa'arim Be'alef. That's the only thing he learned. He learned nothing else. Okay, that's very interesting. Eini, is that true? That's the only thing he learned? The Amar of Yochanan. Remember, we started our siman with Shmona Asar, and they're moving to Shnei Asar. Here's the Shnei Asar. The Amar of Yochanan. Yud Beis Talmidim Hayulo the Raboshi of Aribi. There were 12 students who were there in total. The Yud Ches Yamim Gadalti B'neihem, and Rav Yochanan said, I was there for 18 days. V'lamadti Leiv Kol Echad Ve'echad. I learned the hearts of all of those people. V'chachmas Kol Echad Ve'echad, and I understood the level of wisdom of each of those people. You just told me you only learned one piece of information when you were there, which was that our Mishnah is with an Aleph Ma'abrin. But you just also said in another source of Yochanan that you knew their Leiv and you knew their Chachma. So which one is it? Answers the Gemara. Leiv Kol Echad Ve'echad. The Chachmas called Echad Ve'echad Gamar. Your Taka is true about his Chaverim, about the Talmidim, that he did learn from them. However, Gemara lo Gamar. He didn't learn any Gemara from the Rebbe. Ibai Seima Minaihu did hu Gamar. He learned from the friends. Minay did lo Gamar. He didn't learn from the Rebbe. So Ibai Seima, third possible answer, Davar Echad B'Mishnah Seinu Gamar. There's only one thing he learned in our Mishnah, but there's plenty of other Torah that he learned in regards to other Mishnayos and other sources in the Tanaim and Amorai. Okay, Gamar of Yochanan, another story. Kshayulomd in Torah, Eitzel Ravosha Beribi. Hainu Yoshvin Arba Be'ama. They sat 4 people within an Amma. You need to understand how difficult that is. Remember how many Tfachim are in an Amma? Is it 5? Is it 6? Everyone's 4, and this is an Amma, right? So 4 people in one Amma. 1, 2, 3, 4. So clearly wasn't 2020 or the Spanish flu. That's for sure. That's this Gemara was not meant for this year. So then,
so they probably lie down in their head.
Right. I mean,
it also is probably not literal. It probably just means that they were learning very packed in. It was a jammed room. They had to work very hard. I remember it's not physically possible. You'd have to be literally 4 inches wide and standing sideways.
Even front to back.
Yeah, I'm saying even if you're the width of a person's body, by and large, most people are not that thin. It might be the exception. So that was just one sheet says that they were only arba ba'ama. Amar Rabbi said, forget you. Kshehayinu lomdin Torah etzel Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Then it was Hainu Yoshvin Shisha ba'ama. It just means that it was really jam packed. When I was in yeshiva in Shalvim during my year in Israel, we went to hear of Moshe Shapiro's Zatzal. That room was mamish like jam packed. You had to get there like a half hour early just to get a seat. And a lot of people didn't get into the room. It was every single seat was taken, standing room only. So that's, I think, conceptually what's happening here. Next, 2/3 of the way down. Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Oshia Baribi Bidoro, Rav Meir Bidoro. Rabbi Yochanan said that Rav Oshia Baribi in his generation was like Rav Meir and Rav Meir's generation. Ma Rabbi Meir Bidoro lo yachlu chavrev lamad also daito. And we saw this earlier, that the reason why we don't pass him like Rav Meir is because people couldn't follow him. His brain was just like on a whole different level. It was hard to follow this. Not that he was wrong, chas v'shalom, he was right, but it was just hard to follow him. What's that?
I heard that he can be on the offense and defense of a question.
Oh, that's the brilliance of it. Yeah, you can play it's a chess game by yourself, is what you're saying. Yeah, beautiful. So that's what Rav Meir was like. Af Rav Oshia lo yachlu chaver avlamod also daito, and Rav Oshia Baribi was like that as well. From Rav Yochanan, liban shel rishon kipischo shel ilam. The hearts of the early ones were the size, the hearts of the early ones were like the size of a ballroom. The shalachronim, and of the later ones, kipischo shel heichal, like that of an antechamber. The anu kimelo nekev machat sidkis. We are like the very tiny slit at the eye of a needle. What does that say about us? Shem Yirachim. Says the Gemara, who's who? Rishonim Reb Akiva, Chornim Reb Elazar ben Shamua. Those talking about those earlier people. And who's talking here? This is Rav Yochanan. And Ika Da'amre, no, it was all a generation later. Rishonim Reb Elazar ben Shamua, Chornim Reb Oshia Baribi. Ve'anu kimelo nechev machat sidkis. The Yerida Sadoros, they felt it. They felt it already. But they also were going from Churban to, or just approximately, they were a little bit later than that. But the Churban had happened already. So next, 15 lines from the bottom. Amar Abaye, the anan ki sichta beguda ligmara. We are like a sichta beguda. We're like a little pin in the dirt. Guda is that dirt? Guda? That's what I thought it was.
Peg in a wall.
Peg in a wall. Dirt, yeah, wall. Okay, fine. Sichta beguda, peg in a wall ligmara in regards to learning Gemara. Now remember, their Gemara is not our Gemara. Their Gemara consisted of basically knowing all the Tanaim by heart and knowing all the Amoraim by heart and how they interplay. We have the easier version, as it were, much easier. They had it all Baal Peh, and they had to know how all of it played by heart. Amar Rava ve'anan ki etzba'asa b'kira l'sivara. And we're like a finger in wax as it relates to understanding. Amar Ravashi anan ki etzba'asa b'bira l'shikcha. We're like a finger in beer as it relates to remembering things. The second you take your finger out of the beer, it levels out. It's nice that you learned it the first time, but the second you take your finger out, you're done for. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Bnei Yehuda Sheikh Pidu al Shonam, the people who lived in Yehuda, in the central part of Eretz Yisrael, Sheikh Pidu al Shonam, who were makbid about their language. We'll figure out what this means in detail. Niskaima Torahs Biyadim, they were able to remember their Torah. Bnei Galil, the people who lived up north, Shaloi Pidu al Shonam, who were not careful about their language, Lo Niskaima Torahs Biyadim, their Torah was not remembered. They would forget it. Midi Bikpei the Talya Milsa, is that what it is? As long as I speak the right way, I'm going to remember everything. That's what it's all dependent on. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ela bnei Yehuda dedaike lishna u misneche luhu simna. They did two things. They were medaike in their language, and they would make simanim, mnemonics, whatever they were, in order to remember what they were learning. We're going to have one on Daf Nundalid today. We'll see that Nundalid is a cute little acronym to help us remember something. We'll discuss that when we get there. So they had two things going from them, the Bnei Yehuda. They were Daike Belishna, and they were Misnecheluhu Simana. Then Niskaima Taras and Biyoda. Then they remember things. But the Bnei Galil, the lo Daike Lishna, the lo Misnecheluhu Simna, there's really two features. You have to be Medaike in your Lashon, and you also have to use Simana. But the Bnei Galil didn't have either of them. By them, lo Niskaima Torasa. Bnei Yehuda Gamru Mechad Rabba. As well, the Bnei Yehuda, they all learn their Torah from one Rebbe. Niskaima Torah and biyadam. By them, you have one Rebbe, you learn everything from one person. That person's your Rebbe Muvak, a halachic status of a Rav, different status in regards to tearing Kriya and some other factors that come out. And Bnei Gadol, Delo Gamra Mechad Rabba, up in the north, they were learning from everybody. They weren't dedicated to one Rav. Lo Niskaima Torah and biyadam. So this, by the way, should not be limiting because yes, it's true. A person should have a posek, a person should have, but you also have to know what you're talking about. Like in questions in Hashkafa, I go to one of my Rabbi who's a Talmud of Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal. When it comes to halachic psaka, I speak to Rabbi Robinson. Like it's not shopping chas v'shalom. That's also, that's totally not allowed. But there has to be like I've called Rabbi first before and he had said to me, I'm not the bucky here on kashrus. I want you to call this person in the community. He's said that to me a dozen times when I'm standing in Jewel. Like, can I buy the minced garlic that only has a K on it? Be like, call this person, give me a phone number. I called that person. He's like, yes, mutter, no problem, whatever it was. So you have to know who you're calling, and it has to make sense. Of course, we don't go shopping.
So you're saying that one rabbi can't know everything by it.
I think I'm not saying that it can't be the case. I'm just saying that you need to understand who you're calling. Right? I'll give you a great example of this. I had a fascinating shaila that I shared this shaila with you offline about a couple that yes, it's fine. The couple wasn't able to use any regular means of birth control. So nothing. They couldn't use any, not the pills she couldn't take. She couldn't use any of the IUDs, nothing. So and they were not ready to have children. So their shaila was, can we use a form of protection like a condom? Is that permissible? So I knew the couple's background and I called the posek for NCSY and he basically walked me through the whole sugya. He was not happy about it at all. And we talked out about what the best of the worst options were. So you just have to, like, I looked at that sugya, I'm like, I know who I'm going to call right now. And I called him. He's a major posek in the tri-state area, very well respected name. And I put it all on his shoulders. I said, guess who's not answering this question? You just tell me what I'm supposed to tell, not only the halacha, but how do you want me to frame the halacha also? Okay, let's keep going. We'll talk later. We're recording. We'll discuss this.
I like calling you out.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not embarrassed by it at all, but we can talk later. So says the Gemara, let's continue. So you should have one Rebbe where possible. Ravina Amar Bnei Yehuda the Gala Masechta. Rashi says Gala Masechta means that they taught learning to others. Where one is teaching a Masechta to other people, then he's kaima Torah and biyadam. That's pasha. The best form of learning is teaching. Your brain processes things on a much deeper level when you're forced to teach. Bnei Gadol delo Gala Masechta, but the people who are Bnei Gadol, they did not teach to others. So then lo niskaima Torah and biyadam. David Gali Masechta, David HaMelech. This was also part of the siman above in the parentheses about David. David did teach to others. Shaul lo Gali Masechta, and Shaul did not. What was the nafkamina between them? David the Gali Masechta Ksibe. The pasuk is very positive. Yirech Yiruni v'Yismachu. By Shaul, the pasuk is very negative. The lo Gali Masechta, he didn't teach others. Ksibe, the pasuk says, is a mistake in the Gemara. Uv'chol asher yifnei yarshia. That's the appropriate pasuk, and we are now on the top of Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Speaking of Shaul, says the Gemara of Amar Rav Yochanan, Rashi says, what sin did Shaul do? It was about the Kohanim that were killed in Nov. Rashi says, Dibur Maschel also Avon de Nov Ir Kohanim, where I believe it was 70, 80 Kohanim were killed. I remember offhand. I can't remember which one. 70? Yeah. So then says the Gemara, how do we know that Shaul got forgiveness from Mamash, a major Avon? Shenemaru Machar Atau Vanecha Imi B'Mechitzasi. Rav Asher Weiss was asked to Shaila this week. A person had COVID. They did not take appropriate responsibilities. They gave someone COVID and the person died.
Oh, that's
so Rav Asher Weiss was asked to Shaila, can I get mechila? Is it retzach? These are real shailas. I heard Rav Asher Weiss say, I have the video, I can share with you. Very powerful, very powerful. So he said, somebody asked him this week and he said, whatever the psak is, the person's never going to live it down. That's like you feel a personal achrayus for life. It's very powerful. So even though Afal Pita the Kohanim were killed, the fact is that he still got tshuva, which is this is the week after Yom Kippur. It's a very, very, very powerful idea. You could do something that has permanent actions, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu can grant you mechila. And that's what the Gemara says. You will be with me, imi b'mechitzasi, within my partition, which means that you will be with me in the Olam HaEmes. Speaking to Shaul. Amar Rabbi Abba, if you ask the people who are from Bnei Yehuda who are Medayik in their language, me'avrin tnan or me'avrin tnan, would they know if it's with an aleph or if it's with an ayin? Akuzu tnan or akuzu tnan, again, aleph and ayin. Speaking about a sugya in Bechoros, about an animal that has a mum. So yeah, they'll know the answer to that. So she'ilinu, they asked him the amre lay, and the response was ika detani me'abrin ika detani me'abrin. What do you want me to tell you? They are medayik, but the answer isn't one way. There's two answers to this. Some say with an aleph, some say with an ayin. Ika detani akuzu with an aleph, ika detani akuzu with an ayin. Bnei Yehuda dedaika lishna maihi. What is an example of the Bnei Yehuda who are so medaik in their lashon? We know you told us they're medaik in their lashon. What? Give us an example of where they're medaik in their lashon. So it says the Gemara, Dahu bar Yehuda, the Amar lahu talis yeshli limkor. There was a person from Yehuda who's medaik in his language, and he wanted to sell a talis. Amar lo, my gavan talischa. What is the shade of color of your talis that you're selling? So he answered in a very specific way. Amar lahu, kitradin ale adama, like the beets, the leaves of the beets on the ground. Very specific answer, right? He says chiseled down to this leaf color, even to the type of if we would have said a green leaf, okay, it's a green leaf. We know what green looks like, right? So here he's being very specific. What would be an example of the Bnei Galil, the people up in the north who are not Medaik in their language? Says the Gemara, last of the short lines, the Gimel Amud Beis, says the Gemara, Dehahu bar Galila dehava ka'azil, ve'amar lehu imar leman. Does anyone have an imar? The Gemara says, I don't know what you're talking about. Amrulay, Galila Shota, you're from the Galil, that you're clearly not so sharp in your language. Chamar lemirkav or chamar lemishte. When you said imar, were you speaking about chamar, similar letters, or close enough? Were you talking about an animal to ride on, or were you talking about chamar lemishte, or beer or wine to drink? Or were you talking about imar milbash, clothing to wear, or imar, or an animal is kasa, to shecht and to eat? So he was very unspecific. A woman wanted to say to her friend, let's go eat these wonderful foods, chalba. They were foods that were fats from an animal. They taste very good. But she was her words all sloshed together back and forth. And the result was the following, which is not a coherent sentence. Shluchti, which is not a word. Rashi points out what she meant to say was shluvti, which is a reference in that language to a friend. But she said shluchti instead. Tochlech lavi. Tochlech chalva, which is what it should have said. She said tochlech lavi, like they blended together. You should be eaten by a lion. So she was not careful in her language, which is very different than let's go out to dinner together, right? The feeling is not quite the same. There's a woman who walked into the Beis Din and she said to the judge, this is what came out of her mouth, but not at all what she meant. Rashi here details all of this, but what she said was, Amar le, Mari Kiri, my master, Kiri is my servant. That was not the word that she meant to say. It kind of slipped out. Tifla, obviously. Tifla is a board. She meant to say Tavla, which was something else, right? She slipped up again. The Ganvuch min, and you were stolen. She didn't mean to say that you, the Dayan, were stolen. She meant to say that the board was stolen. The Kadu Havas, and then we measured it. The Kad Shadru Lach Ilave. If I were to stretch you out over the thing that I lost, Lomati Karech Aara, your feet wouldn't even reach the ground. Totally incoherent, totally like a drunk person talking kimat. It's totally not coherent. Am Hasad the Bey Rebbe, the maidservant that worked in Rebbe's house, Ki Havas Mishtaya Belashon Chachma, she would speak with wisdom. How did she speak? Amra Hachi, she says as follows. Alas nakvas bekad, when she'd bang on the kli, on an empty kli. So then Yadun Nishraya Likineho, and then the birds would go to their coop. The birds should go to their coop. So if she's knocking on an empty kli, it sounds hollow. Chevra, it's time to go home. Rebbe has to go to sleep. What if she wanted them to stay? They could have a bay de leisvun when she wanted them to stay. Have a amr that she would say as follows. Yadi basar chaverta, the port of another bottle has been opened. V'siskefe alas bekad ki ilfa de'azla b'maya, and the ladle that brings out the wine is floating in the water is floating in the wine like a boat on the water. So again, she just spoke beremez. She spoke in a little bit more of a sophisticated way, and that's what it means to speak b'chachma. Rabbi Yossi bar Asyan ki haba mishtay b'lashon chachma. What would he say? Amar, follow this. This is brilliant. This is like word ciphers. Amar asuli shor. Mishpat, shor in Aramaic is with a tough, tor, and a mishpat is a din, tor din, tradin, beats. There's a play on words. It's shor mishpat. Rashi points this out. Shor mishpat, tor din, tradin, bitur miskein. Bitur miskein. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. So Rashi here is about 3/4 of the way down. Rashi says bitur miskein. Bitur, that's a mountain. Har miskein dal. Chardal, mustard seeds. Again, a play on words. So he said, shor mishpat b'tur miskein, and what that really meant was he wanted beets with mustard seeds. The cat have a shalbu ushpiza, and when he would be asking about his guest, he'd make a play on words like a notary cone with each part of the word playing out. Amar hachi, gvar, which is ish, pum, dain, chai. How is this person doing? Ma zo tova yesh. And if you look in Rashi, just below where we were before, gvar, pum, din, chai. Ush, pi, zu, chai. Ush, pizim. Is this person well? Again, a play on words about a guest. We're about almost halfway down in Gimel Amud Beis. What? Yeah, perfect timing. Perfect timing. It always overlaps. Getting tshuva for murdering people. It's Givaldic timing, right after Yom Kippur. I mean, it should never happen, but I'm just saying. Rabbi Abo ki mishtay b'lashon chachma. How would he speak when he wanted to speak b'chachma? Hava amar hachi. Here's what he'd say: Asrigu lepechamin. Make the coals red. Arkiu lezahavin. Lay them out over gold. Ve'asuli shnei magidei be'alta. And make me 2 speakers of the night. So the Rashi explains what's going on here. Please warm up the fire and cook me 2 birds who otherwise would crow in the morning. And when it's still dark out, the birds which are ba'alata, they were magide ba'alata. They speak in the alata. They speak in the dark. Those are the birds. It's code word. It's just like just speaking in mashal form. Some say he would say a little different. Vayasu li bohen shnei magide ba'alata. Just another way of saying the same thing. Please make me these 2 speakers of the night, representing, of course, the roosters that crow early in the morning. Amru le Rabbanan le Rabbi Abo. Hispeninu hechan. Amar le Rabbanan le Rabbi. Hispeninu hechan Rabbi Lai Tzafun. Where is Rabbi Lai? I can't find him. Amar lahen alatz ben Ara. He 2 versions of what's going on here. Either he went and got married, or he's learning Torah. One of the 2. Aharonis, from an Aharon family. She's a Bas Kohen. Acharonis, my second wife. Aranis, she was wide awake. Vihinarisu, and he was therefore also awake. They had gotten married the night before. They presumably, it's not clear from Rashi here, but presumably they had just gotten married and they were being osek in the mitzvah of Tashmish Shamita on the night of their wedding, and he was sleeping in because he was up late the night prior. Amar le, Amre la isha, ve'amre la masechta. Some say this is speaking about a woman getting married, and some say no, it's just talking about learning. And when it says aharonis, it's talking about Seder Kodshim, which is also just Kohen related. Okay, very well. Amre la le Rabbi Lai, hatzpeninu hechan Rabbi Abo, tzafun, where's Rabbi Abo hiding? We just asked before the other way about Rabbi Lai. Amar lahen nisyayitz b'machtir. He spoke to the one who was crowned, namely he spoke to his Rabbi, to the Rosh Yeshiva. V'hin gave them Mepiboshes, and he went down to a yeshiva that was named after Mepiboshes. Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Mepiboshes lifnei ziknei darom shein chachamim meod al shem shahem Mepiboshes adam gadol karilu achi. And these chachamim in this yeshiva were on a remarkably high level, and they named them after Mepiboshes, who as well was on a very high level. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. I've never lost in a conversation, isha tinok v'tinokes, except for 3 conversations that happened between myself and a woman, myself and a child, and a male child, and myself and a female child. Isha maihi, what's the story with the woman? Pamachas nisarachti etzel achsanya achas. I stayed in a particular inn. Asta sabli pulin. The woman made dinner. She made a bean dish, whatever it was. B'yom rishon achaltim v'lo shiartim en klum. I ate everything on the plate. Great dish. Shnia lo shiartim en klum. Second day also finished everything. B'yom hashlishi hikdi chasan b'melach. She burned it with salt, meaning she put in too much. So she didn't actually burn it. She just put in more salt. Kevan sheta'amti, once I tasted it, mashachti yadi, man, I retracted my hand. I stopped eating. It was inedible. Amra li Rabbi mipnei mayin chasoid. Why is it that you're not eating? Amarti la, I responded to her, kfar sa'ati mi be'odyom, which was, it had to be the truth. He had already eaten already that day. Amra li, hayalacha limshoch yadecha mina pas. Maybe you should have stopped eating the bread so you could at least be mechabed me by eating my food. And then she followed up with the real musar. Amar li Rebbe, shema lo hinachta peya b'rishonim. Maybe you should have left over a little bit the first time you were eating. Namely, you should never be finishing your plate. It's important to dish out all the food from the chalent pot. But you're a Talmud Chacham, you should not be fressing like that. You should leave over a peya, just a little corner. You should leave over a little bit just for self or sin. It's not bal tashchis. It's being done for a reason. V'lo kach amru chachamim. Don't the rabbis say that? Ein mashayrin peya be'ilfis. You don't leave over anything inside the serving pot. Aval mashayrin peya be'ka'ara. But in your plate, you should leave over a little bit. That was the story with the Isha. Tinokes maihi. What was the story with the young girl? Pamachas haisi mahalach baderech. I was walking on the way. B'haisa derech overes besada. And there was a path that went over a field. B'haisi mahalach ba. And he said that I walked in this path. Amra li tinokes achas. You know how kids ask questions like these kind of unfiltered raw questions, like, why do you look so ugly? These kids, like, they don't like have, why do you not look normal? They're just blunt. So this girl called him out. Amar li tinokes, Rebbe, lo sadahizu, aren't you walking through someone's field? Amarti la, I said, lo derech kvushahi, as you can see, the ground is already beaten down. It's a public passing, a public thoroughfare. Amar li, listim kamoscha kivshua. Yeah, people like you who broke into the field are the reason why it's covered. You shouldn't have done that, and she was right, and he was wrong. You can't just walk through someone's field without permission. It's not okay. Tinok, not because of, I don't know, it's not because of trespassing like we have in American law, it's because you're ruining their field. It's a different din. I don't trespassing, I don't know, how does that work in halacha? Okay, good question, I don't know. Tinok, what about the story of the young boy? Maihi, I was walking. I saw that there was a young boy sitting at a crossroads. How do I get to the city that I'd like to get to? Says the Gemara, Amar Li, the boy was very cryptic. Amar Li Zu, the child said, Tzara ve'arucha, v'zo, Amar Li, he said to me, Zok tzara ve'arucha, this path pointing in one direction is short but long. V'zo arucha uksara, and this other one is long but short. V'halachti b'ksara ve'arucha, and I walked in the path that was short but long. Says the Gemara, Kevin Shigati the ear, when I got close to the city, Matzasi shemakifan osa ganos upartesim, I saw that there were these fields and I wasn't able to get through. I couldn't get to the city. I saw the city, I could see it, but there were fences, whatever the limitations were, I couldn't get there. So chazarti lachora, I went back to the crossroads where the boy was. Amarti lo bani, hello amr slik tzara. You said that the field was short, that the path was short. Amar li velo amarti lach arucha. Didn't I also say it was long? I said it was tzara v'arucha. Now shakti val rosho. I kissed him on the head. Ve'amarti lo, and I said ashrechem Yisrael shekulchem chachamim gdolim atem migdulchem ve'ad ktanchem. Even the little kids. My Rebbe said when we started learning smicha, he said, if you want to learn halacha well and you want to be able to answer shilas for a community, you have to learn every tur, every Beis Yosef, every shach, and every taz. His language was, and I only realized it later, was this Gemara. He said, the derech aruka shehi derech kitzara is to learn everything in the Beis Yosef and see the Rishonim inside. Because it's arucha, it's a longer path in the beginning, but you'll know how to answer shilas later because you have a bedrock, you have all the information. The derech kitzara shehi derech aruka is when you skip all of that and go to the Shulchan Aruch. Oh, I looked in the Shulchan Aruch. I know what the Shach says. Yeah, but you don't know any of the context of the Rishonim because you never learned that. That's a derech kitzar. It's short in the beginning. She derech haruka. So that's mamish a reference to this Gemara.
That was like the easy path at the beginning in the.
So here we're seeing the reference. It's kitzara she haruka. Yeah, it's shorter to the city, but you'll see that it's really much longer. You can't get through. So that's the bad version. Arucha she derech kitzara was the good version. That's how the Gemara clears that up. All right, we got 17 minutes and a big amud to go. Let's go. We're 4 lines from the bottom. Nun Gimel Amud Beis says the Gemara of Yosef have a ka'azib le'orcha ashkechei leBruria. For those of you who've never met Bruria before, Reb Meir's wife, a very, very strong personality. And wow, for our first blush of her, she has no problem saying her feelings. Amar la be'ezo derech neilech lelod. And Rabbi Yossi Haglili, the great Tana, Rabbi Yossi Haglili says to Bruria, what is the way which we get to load? Amra le glili shota. Whew. Just right out of the gates. What's wrong with you, Galil? Lo kach amru chacham al tar b'sichei ma'isha. I'm a woman. You cannot talk to me like that. Too many words. Hayalach lomar be'ez elulod. You should have asked the question shorter. Bruria, it's just a great personality. So that was the end of story number 1. Next, another Bruria story. Bruria ashkachte lahu talmida dava kagaris belechisha. There was a person who was sitting learning by himself, and he was learning silently. He wasn't learning out loud. So what'd she do? Pasha. She kicked him. Batshabe. And she kicked him. Rashi says, Ba'ata bo. She actually kicked him, which is a reminder of some of the stories that we've seen about the Tanaim and Amoraim who carried people on their shoulders of the opposite gender. And they asked a kasha on that. What about Yehurim? What about, if you knew in my head that she was like bored, I'm mamish oslik b'simchas, oh, fine. The Rambam reflects this idea when it comes to physical contact, that there's a nafkamina between physical contact that has a yetzer hara to it, which is derech taiva, versus physical contact that doesn't. That's why it's mutter for a person to shake hands under pressing circumstances, according to some poskim, according to others, it's still not.
Rarely derech.
What?
Kicking is rarely derech.
Kicking is rarely derech chiba. That's exactly right. So that was clearly what was going on here. But a remarkable response. Yeah. So it's just fascinating that this was her response. It's a very powerful response, a very strong response. Let's continue in the Gemara. That's what she did. Amar lei, she said, Lo kach kasuv. Doesn't the pasuk say, Arucha b'chol u'shmura, im arucha beramach evarim shalach nishtameres. If the Torah is arucha, if you set the table, if you've done all the learning with your limbs, meaning you're even talking, nishtameres. That's when the Torah is kept. That's when you'll remember it. Bim la ve'ena nishtameres. And in fact, the story that reflects this idea still further, not just Bruria. There's a source in the Tanaim. Talmud Echad Hayel Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, adding in the words from the Hagos on the side. Shahayashonim b'lachash, he would learn quietly. Lachar gimel shanim shakach talmudo. After 3 years, he forgot what he learned. He left yeshiva, he couldn't remember because he didn't learn out loud. Tana Talmud Echad Hayel Rabbi Elazar shenischai streifel l'makom shemirachim, because he forgot his learning. The Mishnah of Pirkei Avos, you're not allowed to forget your Torah. Amru lo, they said in Shamayim hinichulo. Let this person not be chayv sreifa because of what? She'adam gadol shimesh, because he was close to a wonderful, great Talmud Chacham, and that was that of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Amar le Shmuel Rav Papa Shinina, the bright one, he said to what? What did I say? Why would I do that? Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda, thank you very much. They didn't even talk to each other, Shmuel and Rav Papa. They were 2 generations apart. Okay. Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda was a Talmud of Shmuel, which makes a lot more sense than Rav Papa. Okay. Shinana, bright one. Psach pumech kri. Open your mouth when you read Psach pumech tani, and open your mouth when you learn Torah Shabbal Peh. You should be talking. Ki heche detiskayim bich v'soreich chayai. That you should, the Torah should be within you, and the Torah will be your life. Shne'emar, as the pasuk says, "Ki chayim heim lemotzehem ulechol besaro marpeh." How do we learn that pshat in the pasuk? Al tikri lemotzehem elo lemotzehem bepeh. Those who take it out of their mouths, those who actually learn out loud. Amar le Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda shinana chatof ve'achol chatof ve'ishtei. When you have food, you should eat it. When you have a drink, you should drink it. Ta'alma de'azlinan minei ki hilula dami. The world that we live in is kind of like a wedding. Relatively short, a lot going on, and then you go home. Obviously, a clear mashal. But Rashi doesn't view this as a mashal. He actually says, like, you just need to eat the food that you have because you don't know what you're going to have tomorrow. Very practical. But in Hashkafa, I guess you could take a little jump off the page if you want. Amar le Rav le Rav Hamnuna. Rav says to Rav Hamnuna, Bini, im yesh lecha heitev lach. If you have money, you should enjoy it. She'ein b'sh'ol ta'anug, because when a person dies, there is nothing for them to enjoy. Ve'ein l'maves hisma'amea. There's nothing else. You just spend it. If you want to say, I'm going to leave it for my kids, hopefully it'll get utilized. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have a will. You should have a will. But the point here is that life is short. Life is precious. This is the pasuk of Al Tira. The pasuk says, so all of these things, you should use them as you have them. It's not a good financial planning model, but if you're planning on retiring and having money, then you should see a financial planner. People are similar to the growing grass. Halalu notzitzim. Some are doing just fine. They don't need any support. But halalu novel, and others are withering and they do need support. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, hamahalach b'derech, ve'eni mo levaya. If a person is traveling and they are by themselves, yasok b'torah, you are obligated to learn. Shenamar ki levias chen. What is the pasuk here? Ki levias chen hein. That's what the pasuk says. Chash barosho. If you have a headache, yasok b'torah. Your medicine. That's the acronym I told you. Nun dalid, no drugs. That's the acronym for today's daf, Nun dalid. Because if it's chash barosho, you can lay off the Tylenol and you can just learn Torah. Shneimar ki levias chen hein l'roshcha. Chash begrona, your throat hurts. Yasok b'torah. Shneimar va'anokim l'gargarosecha. What about chash b'meav? You have a stomach ache. Yasok b'torah. Shneimar refuas tehi what is that word? Refus tehi l'sarecha. What about your bones? Yasok b'torah shene'emar, as the pasuk says, v'shikui la'atzmosecha. Chash b'chol gufo yasok b'torah shene'emar u'lechol b'saro merapeh. So that is what the Gemara says. It is a solution. I remember hearing pshat in this Gemara. The Gemara doesn't say to make you feel any better. The Gemara just says that's what you should be doing. It's a siman that you need to learn. This isn't a solution like a medicinal solution per se. This is just what your body's telling you. What Karesh Baruch Hu, when he gives you that throat ache, the stomach ache, the headache, whatever, you need to be learning Torah. But again, the Gemara, I saw this, I heard this many years ago, I don't remember where, that the Gemara does not say you'll feel better in the end of the process. Just that if you do them there, it is good for you. Amar Rabbi Yehuda B'Reb Chia, Bo Reish Shalok Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Midas Basar Adam. Midas Basar Adam Adam Nosein Sam L'Chaveiro. When you have a human being, he'll give a drug X to one person, L'Zeh Yafeh V'L'Zeh Kasha. For some people, it's good. For some people, it's not good. This is very healthy for the human body. Amar Rabbi Ami, what does the pasuk mean? Ki noim, Kisi shmerem b'vitnech yachonu yachtav al sfasecha. Emasai divrei Torah ne'imin. When is divrei Torah na'im like this pasuk? Bizman shetishmerem b'vitnech. When you've got it in your belly. Emasai tishmerem b'vitnech. When will it be in your belly? Bizman sheyachonu yachtav al sfasecha. That's when it rolls off your lips, when you can talk about it. Rav Zera amar mehacha. No, we learned that from a different pasuk. Simcha li'ish b'ma'on apiv v'davar bi'ito mato. Emasai simcha li'ish. When is there happiness? Bizman shema'an apiv. When he has it in his mouth. Lishnacharina, another version of this pasuk, how to understand it. Emasai simcha leish b'ma'aneh piv. When is there happiness when there's words in his mouth? Bizman shadavar be'ito mato. When that which is in his mouth is good. Rabbi Yitzchak amar mehacha kikar v'lecha davar mo'od b'ficha v'vavcha lasoso. What does that pasuk mean? Emasai karav le'elecha. When is it close to you? Bizman shebeficha v'vavcha lasoso. When the Torah is in your mouth and in your heart to do. Rava amar mehacha, another source where we learn this idea from. Taivas libo nasata lo ve'areshes fasa bal manasela. Emasai taivas libo nasata lo. When do you get the desires of your heart? That's bizman she'areshes fasa bal manasela. When your lips are not withholding, when you're speaking. Rava rami ksiv. There's two psukim that don't seem to agree against each other. Taivas libo nasata lo. You're going to give him everything in your heart. Uksiv areshes fasa bal manasela. How do we understand this? Zacha, if you merit. When if you merit, you'll get what your heart desires. Lo zacha, then your mouth will never stop moving. Tana debate Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. Kol makom shenemar netzach, sela, and va'ed. These three words. Ein lo hefsek olamis. When you have these three words, that means that they're permanent. They last forever. Netzach t'chsiv kilo leolam ariv lo lenetzach eksof. That I will not be permanently angry at you. Baruch Hashem for that. That's permanent. Sela dechsiv kasher shamanu kenuinu be'ershem tzvakos be'er Elokeinu Elohim yichoneneh ad olam sela. That will be the city forever. And va'ed dechsiv Hashem yimloch leolam va'ed. Let's push it 8 minutes somewhere. All right, we'll stop here, and we'll pick up again on Shabbos. So Shabbos is going to be 1.5 blot, and then we're on target then. So then we're going to do Sunday will be 1 blot as well. Monday is 1 blot. We're good. We're only going to miss Erev Shabbos, Erev Yontif.
Next week will be the same.
And Friday will be a Yontif.
We'll do Thursday and
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just a blot. Oh, sorry. Shabbos is going to be blot and a half, and then Sunday is going to be 1 blot.
I literally came home and
So I mean your garbage bag?
That's right. You said it was you.